Shadow men, the ones we see out of the corner of our eye. And this could be other dimensions, of course. Shadow people phenomena? What are the shadows we glimpse through our peripheral vision, and do they really exist, or is it a figment of man's imagination? I remember when I was moving home, my home, and I had carried my books in my. I have so many books everywhere, um, and I wanted to, carry them in my boxes. I was transferring them with my car, and as I was going into my new home, I thought I saw someone walking around the house, the outside of the house, making a circular, just going around it, like checking the periphery of the house. And when I opened the Holy Bible by random, it said, "Didn't you see me checking your house?" And then it was as if Christ was talking to me. Now, I said this to the priest of our little church in our little shanty town. He says, "Were you afraid when you saw him?" I said, "No." He said, "What did he look like?" I said, "He was a man about, 6 feet, 6.5 feet tall. He was tall. He was about 30 years old, and he was wearing a grayish type of an outfit. It wasn't jeans and a shirt. It was something long, and he had long flowing hair." He says, "Were you frightened of it?" I said, "No, not at all." And because the priest monks have a lot of spiritual experiences, and they know how to answer you. If they don't know, they'll tell you what to do, what to read or who to go to answer your question. And so that was my experience. But anyway, going back to this, growing up, he says, in the countryside, I had the opportunity to be a listener to various stories that we told as children on the beaches, trying to scare each other. It's a common phenomenon after all. A group that sits and tells stories and explores what is its lively imagination, anything looks weird. Thus, I characteristically remembered one of these childhood wanderings where our imagination surprised us, and in a fraction of a second, the brave group of 11-year-old researchers, quote unquote, suddenly transformed into a bunch of terrified children who were running to escape. It was just below the remains of a Venetian castle that adorns one of the hills in my area in the island of Corfu, North Corfu, and in one of the narrow streets leading to one of its gates. There, we had stopped to investigate an old and empty stone house, with the hope of discovering ghosts or anything else that piqued our childhood curiosity. But suddenly, in fear, we stared at the huge shadow that loomed on the right wall of the house. It was a human figure with a huge hat, and it was moving jerkingly on the wall for 2 to 3 seconds before the command "Triascas" is heard, and we disappear from there for good. The Triascas had made its appearance, the figure of an urban legend that circulated on the island in those years, and referred to some shadowy ghost with a hat that left dry on its wake anyone who managed to face him. We did not fall dry, at least not from him. Tragic, since we were all close to going crazy for a while from horror from seeing him. It's a group of 11-year-old boys. Now, several years later, and with the germ of the love of the unexplained not having left my system, as I first thought, it seemed that this childhood urban legend was not as funny as I thought before I researched it. I read about the phenomenon in many reports. From the books of G. Balanos, which reference to the creeping shadow as the Mora phenomenon, the shadow man that appears to young children, about which I had written a little earlier in the paranormal. I'm bringing back the phenomenon of the shadow people, and I will list it below the evidence that exists of their sighting. Of course, placing it in a wider perspective where their existence involves many more ramifications, because we will not only be concerned with their very existence, but also the gates through which these beings penetrate into our own dimension. The shadow people. Those looking for details simply on the shadow people phenomenon read on, and those who were reduced to a scale of finding a much bigger issue like the passageway to our own realm of existence take this evidence as an infinitesimal part of the research already being conducted by the paranormal crew. The shadow men phenomenon. Shadow men, or shadow people, appear to be supernatural, shadowy humanoid figures that, according to proponents of the theory, have been seen passing momentarily on walls, ceilings, and are usually perceived through the viewer's peripheral vision. It's said that they move with rapid, jerky movements and that they just as quickly disintegrate or disappear from sight through walls or mirrors. They are believed to be demonic beings and aggressive, although some people consider them to be a kind of a guardian angel. Okay, there are those of us who, we have seen angels and guardian angels, especially at the time of the sacraments, of the Christian sacraments, and especially, of course, when we pray. Now, of course, they're not demonic; they're divine beings. But you can have both. Usually, God does not only give you the divine beings to see; He also gives you the taste of the opposite, because He wants you to know that they do exist. The enemy and the demonic beings do exist. Now, going back to this, of course, several scientific principles can be used to explain the reports of such experiences. These include visual hallucinations resulting from physical or psychological conditions, abuse, substance use, or side effects of meditation. Another reason that can be enough to watch shadow men is to see shadow people is lack of sleep. Now, initially, these shadowy figures appear in the corner of the eye and finally disappear from the field of vision the moment the viewer attempts to turn to see what's happening. Do they really exist? The first thought that comes to mind is that it was a momentary abnormality of vision, yet the feeling of being watched by someone dark remains, and for months the peripheral vision returns to normal levels until, without warning, it happens again. The seer suddenly sees a shadow in front of him, face to face, darker than darkness itself. They sometimes appear in the form of a human silhouette, mostly male, but generally lack other characteristics or gender, and yet their description does not end here. Sometimes they are as if they wear a hat or cloak, solid, and as if they are formed of smoke. Some such figures have only been seen from the waist up. They hide in corners, inside walls, in closets, buildings. Sometimes they simply fade their presence into the dark recesses of the night. My experience was in midday. It wasn't nighttime. And going back to this, lack of description is a common factor among the several types of shadow people that enter our dimension. And finally, one wonders, what is their purpose? One thing is certain, the bipolarity of these shadowy figures has divided, since many believe that they are creatures that guard us, and others are sure of the demonic nature of these creatures. However, it seems that shadow people are multi-dimensional beings. Shadow people are multi-dimensional beings, keyword. They also keep in mind the way men observe them out of the corner of their eye. Optical displacement. Here it's worth noting that this perspective is perhaps the most suitable for viewing entities that have entered from other dimensions, parallel dimensions to ours. There are, of course, two big problems with this peripheral vision: practice and doubt. You see, it's difficult for someone who functions and thinks with logic and not with his unconscious nature to admit that this momentary glimpse of the shadowy figure in the corner of his eye is real. So automatically, he rejects even if fears function as a subconscious bell for the real presence of an extra-dimensional presence in our own space. Practicing the vision, on the other hand, will make us able to ascertain sightings not only of shadow people, but in time of anything extra-dimensional that exists in the sphere of our existence. The exercise that G. Balanos used to give is particularly interesting. Sit in front of the TV and try to notice everything that happens in the background and not where the attention usually focuses. I quote a very interesting piece from Carlos Castaneda's book, The Fire from Within, quote, Late in the afternoon, Don Juan and I took leisurely walks around the square. As we approached his favorite bench, the people sitting there got up and left. We were seated hurriedly. "We have come to the end of my explanation about consciousness," he told me. "And today you will assemble a different world for yourself, and you will put doubts aside forever. There must be no mistake in what you are about to do. Today, from the vantage point of your heightened awareness, you will shift the assemblage point and in an instant align the emanations of another world. In a few days, when Janara and I meet you at the top of the mountain, you will do the same from the perspective of your physical consciousness. You should align with these emanations in an instant," end quote. Don Juan stated that warriors completed their training when they were able to break the barrier of perception starting from their physical awareness. And I asked, "What if I manage to align with another world?" "You will go there," he replied. "And where will I be, Don Juan?" "In another world, of course. Where else?" he said. "And what will happen to the people around me, the buildings, the mountains, and everything else?" He said, "You will be separated from all this by the same barrier that you broke, the barrier of perception." I asked him what would happen if I moved my point of perception to the street in Los Angeles traffic. He said, "Los Angeles will disappear like a puff of smoke," he replied with a serious expression, "but you will remain in another world." And this is from Discovery of the Ninth Wave. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.